Good morning, Dr. Morgana. My name is Xue Min. Today I will be explaining about the Bolam test and the extent of it in England and Wales. The Bolam test derived from the case of Bolam and Friar Hospital Management Committee set out the standard of care expected in professional negligence cases, particularly medical negligence. In this case, Mr. Bolam consented to undergo electroconvulsive therapy, was not warned if the risk of fracture and without being given muscle relaxant or restraints leading to violent thrashing and serious injury, including fracture acetabular. He sued the hospital management for negligence on 3 grounds: not administering relaxant, not restraining him, and not warning him of the risk. McNeil Jane held that what common practice in a particular profession was highly relevant to the standard of care required. He set out the Bolam test in which professional is not negligent if they act in accordance with a practice accepted as proper by a reasonable body of professional skill and in that particular area. The test acknowledges that the presence of differing professional opinions and practices allowing for a range of acceptable conduct within the profession. In England and Wales, the Bolam test has been a cornerstone in determining professional negligence, especially in the medical field. In the case of Bolito and City and Hackney Health Authority, the claimant, aged of 2, suffered serious brain damage following respiratory failure. Several expert witnesses supported the doctor, and on that basis, the judge found that the doctor had not been negligent. The House of Lords stated that a doctor may be negligent even if there is a body of medical opinions in his favor. He must also be able to show that his opinion has a logical basis. Only rarely will judge decide that the opinion of the number or otherwise competent doctor were not reasonably held, and this was not such a case. In this case, the court marked a shift towards a more balanced approach, where courts could critically assess the validity of the professional opinion rather than accepting it at face value. Additionally, in the case of Whitehouse and Jordan, the defendant, a senior registrar, had delivered a baby through forceps. However, the baby had become weak and suffered asphyxia and brain damage. It was alleged that the defendant had pulled too long and too hard in attempting a forceps delivery before eventually performing a cesarean section. The defendant was held liable by the trial judge, and the defendant's appeal was dismissed by the Court of Appeal. Lord Denning considered that while some errors may be completely consistent with the due exercise of professional skills, other acts or omission may be so glaringly below proper standards as to make a finding of negligence inevitable. Lord Denning's decision reinforced the principle that the court should not readily substitute their judgment for that of medical professionals, provided the professional opinion is reasonable and logically defensible. Next, I will pass it to Vuan Lyn. Thank you.
Thank you, Xue Min. Good morning, Dr. Morgana. My name is Vuan Lyn, and I'm going to present more about the extent of Bolam test. Furthermore, the Bolam test was applied to inform the consent issue in Saturday versus Governors of the Belgium and Royal Maudsley Hospital 1985 to determine that a doctor is not negligent if a responsible body of medical option would support information applied to the patient. Provided to patient. However, Montgomery has since an impact on this. The ruling established that the Bolam test determines a doctor's obligation to inform a patient about potential hazards associated with a suggested course of treatment. There are, however, several exceptions, especially when the therapy enters significant risk, where a judge may determine that withholding information would only be negligent in dire situation or for good medical reasons. The plaintiff appeal was dismissed because it was not possible to show that the surgeon has neglected to inform her of the hazards involving in the therapy. The Courts of Appeal decision stood. In addition, in Minor versus West Midlands Regional Health Authority 1985 provided support of these ideas that the judge ought to take the medical position as the authoritative one and not weigh competing experts' viewpoint. Lord Scarman made the following statement about the evidence of professional standards, preference by a judge between highly esteemed body of professional opinion and other equally esteemed body of opinion does not demonstrate negligence on the part of practitioner whose actions have been approved by these whose opinion were honestly expressive and held were not perfect. If this was the real reason for the judge's decision, and he made a legal error, even though in other portions of his opinion he accurately stated the law, even though the judge correctly articulated the law in other parts of his conclusion. If this was the true basis of his decision, he committed a legal error. Besides, it is not evidence of negligence to favor one reputation of professional opinion over another when it comes to diagnosis and treatment. Because of doing so would imply that a patient's right to care would be based on physician experience. In the Standard of Wilshire versus Essential Area of Authority 1988, is not altered based on physicians of level expertise. It was only decided when it is unacceptable and that negligence have happened. Lord Bridge of Harvard stated that McGee principle does not apply in this case. Thus was the only possible explanation for McGee's injury instance, and there were other choices, and it is not obvious if the authorities' carelessness actually caused the injury, and also other possible causes could have also contributed to the injury, as there's no reason to believe that harm caused by authority negligence is not held liable. In Chester v. Alpha 2004, regarding the causation of requirement for informed consent discussed the necessity to inform the patient imposed penalties for professional carelessness. Alpha violated his duty of care by falling alert Chester to the risk given the chances she had have undergone surgery. If has been provided, then there were no causal tie. However, in order to give doctors obligation to warn patients such about risks about therapies, practical content to protect patients' autonomy, it was also accepted to modify the established theories of causality to the extent necessary to support her claim.
Good morning, Dr. Morgana. My name is Yap Xin. I will be presenting about Malaysian legal framework position. The base of Malaysian judicial system is English common law. The Federation of Malaya adopted English common law by passing the Trivial Law Ordinance 1956, before becoming independent of the United Kingdom in 1957. After Malaysia achieved independence in the 1957, this legislation continued to be enforced under the revised title of Trivial Law Act 1956. There are three significant Malaysian reviewing decisions established a pure transplant method of the English Bolam test. Judges often rely on this previous case in subsequent medical negligence lawsuits involving diagnosis and treatment, underscoring their importance in legal proceedings. Two significant early Malaysian cases were Chin Kiao and Government of Malaysia and Annal 1967 and Swami and Matthew and Annal 1968. In the case of Chin Kiao and Government of Malaysia and Annal, the plaintiff and Amma was given a penicillin injection by the doctor without knowing her medical history. The plaintiff passed away an hour after receiving the medication. The judge of the High Court had to decide if the doctor has any legal duty to find out the patient's medical history. Therefore, at the time, the reputable body of medical opinion considered the doctor's decision to provide the medication without knowing anything about the patient's negligent history to be acceptable. As a result, the High Court judge applied the Bolam test and determined that the doctor was false, but the Federal Court dismissed the legal action with cause, reject the High Court judge's decision. After an appeal, the previous counsel determined that Federal Court wrong in discard the High Court judge's decision. The Bolam test was chosen as the preferred test to establish the standard of care in medical negligence case in Malaysia after the Premier Council support the decision of the High Court. Another earlier Malaysian case which applied the Bolam test is the Swami and Matthew. In this case, the plaintiff Swami sought medical treatment from the second responder doctor due to itching on his hand and leg. The doctor was unsure about his diagnosis. Plaintiffs were got 3 injunctions of arsenical drug on different dates. The third injunction had a lower doses than the private 2. The plaintiff claimed that arsenical drug was the reason of his paralysis of both hand and leg, which occurred after the third injunction. The federal court was required to decide whether the appellant process was caused by the arsenical remedies, and if so, how the doctor given the remedies in 3 doses constituted negligent. The federal court ruled that the doctor was not negligent. In landfill tender thesis, emphasized that professionals are expected to demonstrate, show a fair, acceptable, and suicide level of skill, rather than striving from the utmost professional standard. Parable LP in Swami interpret this legal principle accordingly. A man or woman who practice a profession is bound to exercise the care and skill of an ordinary competent practitioner in the profession, be it the profession of an accountant, a banker, a doctor, solicitor, or other wish. Based on this principle, the judge acknowledged the medical testimonies from the doctor's sole husband, which indicate that the arsenical remedies did not lend to the apparent pulses, and that administer 3 doses of the drug was deemed adequate within the medical profession. Next, I will pass to my group member, Zhi Ying.
Good morning, Dr. Morgana. My name is Zhi Ying. I will be presenting about departure from the Bolam test in Malaysia, cases of Kamala, anak perempuan, Ramang and Eastern Plantation Agency, and cases of Fu Fiona and Hospital Ascenta. First, departure from the Bolam test in Malaysia. However, in the High Court decision of Ingrogers and Whittaker 1992 had a crucial impact in medical negligence judicial decision in Malaysia. The Bolam test was refused by the Malaysian High Court in the late 1990s regarding medical diagnosis and treatment. Kamala, anak perempuan Ramang and Eastern Plantation Agency, and Fu Fiona and Hospital Ascenta were particularly important because of their impact on subsequent legal developments in Malaysia. Second, cases of Kamala, anak perempuan Ramang and Eastern Plantation Agency. In the case of Kamala, anak perempuan Ramang and Eastern Plantation Agency, Mr. Dinasa had a history of hypertension. On 3 July 1984, while at work, he experienced dizziness and fainted. He was taken to the estate clinic. On 11 July 1984, he felt persistent dizziness and fainted, and he was urgently admitted to Klang Hospital. He was later transferred to Johor Bahru Hospital, where he passed away on 12 July 1984. According to Whittaker test, the standard of care expected from a person with specialized skill of competence is that of an ordinary skilled individual exercising and claiming to possess those specific skills. This standard is not solely determined by the practice endorsed by a responsible body of opinion within the relevant profession. Ultimately, the question is whether it aligns with the standard of reasonable care required by law, and this is a matter for the court to determine. It cannot be delegated to any profession in the community. The second defendant, as a hospital, failed on their duty to the patient by choosing not to admit them to the hospital, deeming medical leave unnecessary and refusing to grant it. The fact that his deceased was not hospitalized either caused or contributed to their death. The medical aspect of the doctor's diagnosis and treatment of the patient were not carried out in line with the standard of care. Third, the cases of Fu Fiona in Hospital Ascenta. In the case of Fu Fiona in Hospital Ascenta, 1982, the appellant's vertebrae were displaced twice. The first respondent conducted a surgical procedure on the displaced vertebrae, involving the placement of a loop wire to stabilize the spinal cord. However, the appellant experienced paralysis the day after the operation. Neurosurgeon Dr. Mohandas identified the wire loop as the cause of the paralysis, but the appellant remained paralyzed even after the wire was removed in the second operation conducted without Dr. Mohandas present. However, the plaintiff remained paralyzed after the second operation. The significance of the High Court ruling in full Fiona can be seen in two key aspects. Firstly, it made determination regarding negligent medical treatment that diverged entirely from the Bolam test. Secondly, the case was appealed again in both the Court of Appeal and the Federal Court. The Court of Appeal found fault with the High Court failure to apply the Bolam test. However, the final appeal to the Malaysian Federal Court in 2006 affirmed the High Court findings and the precedent set by the case of Kamalam. Next, I will pass it to my group member Jia Min.
Thank you, Zhi Ying. Good morning, Dr. Morgana. My name is Jia Min. I will be presenting the evaluating any significant disparity in the application of legal principles. The Bolam test has long served as an important foundation for evaluating the standard of care in medical negligence proceedings. In terms of diagnosis and treatment, the test stipulates that the doctor is not negligent if he or she follows a practice recognized by a respected organization of medical professionals. While the test has offered a formal framework for evaluating medical practice, its effectiveness in addressing legal injustices has been significantly questioned. First is the logical analysis. In England, the court decided whether the doctors or the reputable body of medical opinion that supports the judgment is reasonable or defensible according to logic and reason. In the case of Bolito, the test of Bolam applies to diagnosis and treatment only if the court finds the medical opinion illogical and unsupportable. However, reliance on professional consensus is still high. In England, the Bolam test determines if a doctor's methods are congruent with those of responsible medical practices. However, it frequently disregards the patient's right to be informed and give consent to the treatment. The Bolam test prioritizes professional norm over patient right, which represents a problem in current modern ethics. As a result, in Montgomery cases, the court emphasized the importance of a more patient-centered approach in addressing the issue raised by using the Bolam test. Doctor must exercise reasonable care to ensure that the patient is informed of any danger associated with any prescribed or alternative treatment. So now we talk about the application of Montgomery. In Tifel and Johnson 2017, the claimant suffered from severe pain in back and legs after undergoing a surgery by the defendant. The defendant's advice was not found to fulfill the informed consent. The Supreme Court held that claimant would not have agreed to the surgery if proper advice was given, and the defendant was liable for the damages suffered. The principle of Montgomery has been adopted in modern medical negligence cases. When applying Bolam test in diagnosis and treatment, it highlights how a reasonable doctor will act to bring into line with a proper practice accepted by a reasonable body. In contrast, Montgomery test applies to a reasonable patient when it comes to making informed choice based on the potential or significant risk pro. The application of the Bolam test in Malaysia reveals significant disparity when compared to its application in England and Wales, particularly in the judicial approach to professional standard and patient rights. And also, in the case of Zuhasnima binti Hassan Basri and Anwar and Dr. Kuku Velumani P. and Ors 2017, is a significant turning point in Malaysian medical negligence legislation. It reiterated medical practitioners' duty of care to their patient and the need to adhere to established medical standards. The case emphasized the importance of expert testimony in determining whether these requirements were met and if a breach caused actual injury to the patient. It emphasized the importance of clear, convincing evidence in establishing causality and outlined the legal options accessible to victims seeking compensation. The ruling also emphasized the significance of patient safety and accountability in the medical profession, setting a precedent for future cases and reminding healthcare practitioners of the serious legal repercussions of failing to uphold professional standards. As a result, it has substantial consequences for both the legal and medical professional in terms of upholding justice and fostering improved the standards of care. Thank you. So the next I will be passed to Emily Keong Min Yi.
Thank you, Jia Min. Good morning, Dr. Mokana. My name is Emily Keong Min Yi. I'll be presenting on the rest of significant disparities in the application of legal principles, as well as the conclusion of this presentation. And now we're looking into the significance of Rogers versus Whittaker, 1992. The case of Rogers is a key decision in Australian medical law that requires doctors to inform patients about significant risks of proposed treatments. The High Court ruled that doctors must disclose any risk a reasonable person in that patient's position would find important, as well as risks that the specific patient might consider significant. This decision shifted focus from a professional norm to a patient-centered approach, emphasizing the importance of informed consent and clear communication between doctors and patients. Next up is the comparative analysis of judicial deference to medical negligence. In the cases of Montgomery, Rogers, and Zuanisma Hassan Basri and Arnold versus Dr. Kupu Velumani, they show distinct judicial approaches to medical negligence and the duty of care. Montgomery and Rogers emphasize patient autonomy and informed consent, requiring doctors to disclose all significant risks. This shift is evident in the UK and Australia, while Malaysia adopts these standards more moderately. Moving on to the application of Rogers and Zuanisma. In medical negligence law, the standard articulated in Rogers versus Whittaker and Zuanisma binti Hassan Basri and Nano versus Dr. Kupu Velumani are critical benchmarks for assessing medical practitioners' duties and responsibilities. Rogers requires doctors to disclose all significant risks of treatment, considering both general standards and the patient's specific circumstances. Zuanisma also stresses the need for expert testimony to determine if doctors disclose risks that a reasonable patient would find important. These conclusions differ from the standard Bolam test, which relied mainly on medical opinion. Zuanisma, on the other hand, acknowledged the significance of informed consent, but relied heavily on the Bolam test to strike a balance between professional medical norms and patient rights. This shows Malaysia's gradual approach to patient-centered care, still valuing expert medical testimony in setting care standards. As a result, this comparative analysis highlights different judicial views on duty of care, stressing the need for clear evidence to prove causation and adherence to accepted practices. A quick recap of our presentation. The Bolam test continues to serve as a guiding principle in establishing the standard of care in medical negligence cases in England, Wales, and Malaysia. The test focuses on adhering to practices accepted by a responsible body of medical professionals. In England and Wales, cases like Bolito and Montgomery have updated the Bolam test to prioritize patient rights and informed consent. In Malaysia, the Bolam test has influenced legal decisions, with cases like Chinkel versus Government of Malaysia applying its principles. More recent cases show a shift towards balancing professional standards with patient autonomy, similar to trends in Australia seen in Rogers versus Whittaker. While the Bolam test is foundational, continuous legal and ethical developments require ongoing review and refinement of medical negligence standards. Balancing patient rights with professional standards is essential to ensure fair care while protecting patient welfare in changing healthcare environment. And now, here comes the end of our presentation. Thank you for the time and attention.